Hi there, everybody. It's Bean, and welcome to an all new secret sesh just for you, the supporters of great moments in weed history on Patreon, the people who love this show enough to throw in on it and help bring the preservation of true, authentic cannabis history to the world. As always, I gotta say, thank you so much for the support and the inspiration, including those of you who saw my message yesterday about how I recorded this secret sesh, but not the audio part of it. If anybody in the gmiwh extended podcast universe, the gmiwhpu as we like to call it, is a expert or avid or even aspiring lip reader, and you would like 30 minutes of me talking without sound, or I think there's a lot of people who would like the rest of their life of me talking without sound, but I would be happy to supply that recording to you. But otherwise, here we are taking it again. I actually have two backups running. And before we make this an official secret sesh, I'm holding up the joint I'm about to light. I don't want to keep anybody in suspense. So if you read my message yesterday, I do want to say the good news is, yes, indeed, that split pea soup came out really, really good. I think the extra seasoning might have been the salt of my tears. As I realized our technical snafu right before I ate. But c'est la vie, all it really means is that I get to sit here again and through the magic of the interwebs and have a sesh with all you fine people. So let's get right into that, because it had already been a week yesterday, and that was the day before Weedness Day. I'm now actually recording this on Weedness Day as we creep up on the 420 hour, but I'm going to beat it to the punch. So here we go, making this a true secret sesh right from the top. Lovely. Well, I hope you all had a chance to enjoy last Weeds episode on last Weedness Day, when we nerded out on weed with the co-founder of SC Labs, Alec Dixon, who is also a fan and supporter of this podcast. I certainly know that I learned quite a lot in that conversation about the biochemistry of cannabis. It's really fun to talk about that stuff with people who know what they're talking about. And, I hope everybody, oh, it's hard enough to do this once. And I don't mean hard in like, labor sense. I guess I mean hard as in it's just weird to sit in a room by yourself and talk to a video of yourself talking back to you. But here we go. Oh, I got the whole disappearing, reappearing microphone thing. I don't know, folks. Maybe this will be every other weed will tell the incredible true story of cannabis history, and on the alternate Weedness days, you'll get to see a person slowly unravel. But I don't know. Among all of its medicinal benefits, I think the re-raveling capacity of cannabis is underrated. So here we go. Anyway, the theme of this Weeds Secret Sesh is to actually try to out nerd ourselves from last weed. And the way that we're going to do that is, if you hang out until the end of this recording, I am going to attach to the end of it a video presentation that Alec, our guest last week from SC Labs, actually made for all the judges of the Emerald Cup to teach us about how to evaluate cannabis, with a specific focus on terpenes, which we talked about last week as being these sort of essential oils that are found in all different kinds of aromatic plants and that give not only cannabis its aroma, but each individual strain or varietal or cultivar of cannabis its unique, not just aroma and flavor, but some of the secondary effects that cannabis provides. It's really the reason why, one strain might make you want to wash the dishes and another might make you want to take a nap. And especially as we learn that the differences of indica and sativa are really have a lot more to do with the way the plant grows than the effect of the plant. The science of these terpenes is helping us not just appreciate the plant and not just find whatever strain might be the best strain for you at any given moment, but is really helping us understand how we can unlock the potential of this plant now that we are moving past some of these just terrible restrictions on not just consuming and growing and sharing cannabis, but researching cannabis. We're going to find out a tremendous amount in the next 5 years about how to breed new strains of cannabis that are going to be even more beneficial, that are going to smell better, that are going to taste better, but also that might be more tailored to your unique biochemistry, because just like each cannabis plant has its own terpene profile, hi, you are a wholly unique organism in this universe.
And now, live from the White House, Ask President Carter.
Peter? Is this the president?
Yes, it is.
Do you have a question for the president?
I took some acid. I'm afraid to leave my apartment and I can't wear any clothes.
All right, Peter, now just listen. Everything's going to be fine. You're very high right now. You'll probably be that way for about 5 more hours. Try taking some vitamin B complex, vitamin C complex. If you have a beer, go ahead and drink it.
Okay.
Just remember, you're a living organism on this planet, and you're very safe. You've just taken a heavy drug. Now,
Right.
just relax, stay inside, and listen to some music, okay?
Yeah.
Do you have any Allman Brothers?
And finding that intersection between yourself and cannabis is really a wonderful journey and can be a really rewarding one. That said, as we always like to say on this podcast, the difference between some and none when it comes to cannabis is vastly, vastly bigger than the difference between this or that. So if you left last week's episode saying that was barely nerding out at all, and I want to really, really, really nerd out, stay tuned for this video from SC Labs, because little secret, it gets even a little too nerdy for me. As I like to say, I'm a nerd who loves weed, but I don't really see myself as quite a weed nerd. That said, there's a lot of people online calling themselves cannabis experts, and they maybe know a few things, or maybe they have experience as a grower or a smuggler or a dealer or sort of any aspect of it. But be very wary of people who claim to be an expert in anything. And then certainly people who are self-appointed experts. So, just because your flat is, just because your brim is flat, doesn't mean that the head that holds it is as full of knowledge as you might think or you might claim. And so, we really focus on this show from its foundation. We wanted it to be a show about people, about history, about culture, and not get so into the weeds. Weed pun one for this secret sesh. That we lose sight of these bigger issues. I think the really important things to know about cannabis, the things that you really have to know and understand, are very simple. One, that this is an incredibly powerful and safe medicinal plant. And you need to know that as opposed to want to know that, because it could save your life. It could save the life of a loved one. It could help someone in your life get through chemotherapy or stop a severe seizure disorder. And, as we talk about, as the people who know this, as the culture raising the flag for this plant, despite all of this pushback, despite all of this prohibition and oppression, it's really inherent on us to spread that good word, to spread the good news, to borrow a phrase from the gospel. That's what the gospel is, the good news. And we know the good news about this plant. We can't keep it to ourselves, and in particular, when it comes to the medicinal aspects of it. So the more that you know about that, the better ambassador you can be to somebody in your life or yourself who might benefit. Second thing you have to know is, of course, that the prohibition against this plant is racist and oppressive and very damaging to society, and comes with all of these stigmas as well. And that, again, it is inherent on us to be the ones pushing back against that. So if you know those two things, you really don't need to know anything else about weed to enjoy it. I think the next step beyond that is, you want good weed. Why wouldn't you? Whether you're growing it yourself or you're paying your hard-earned money for some, try to get the good stuff. And this is some really good stuff. Also, just don't like, I don't know, man. I guess I'll be perfectly honest. It's like I was just having a shitty week, and recording the secret sesh for you all yesterday just got me to like a silly place and laughing at myself. And by the time it was done, I was like, oh, I feel a lot better. And then, of course, I came back to find out there was no sound. So I'm trying to avoid trying to recreate. I don't know. There's a second track in my mind that's like, would I want to listen to this? If I put 5 on it, is this what I was hoping to get in response? I don't know. Maybe this one's more for me than for you. What a terrible thing to say. This is for all of us. I don't know. Getting back to nerding out on weed. Something that we didn't get to talk about in the interview with Alec, but that is definitely on this topic of nerding out about the biochemistry of cannabis, and something that's been a big concern of mine over the last couple of years, and something that I would like to address in a future episode of Great Moments in Weed History, is that we're not the only ones nerding out about weed, us being people who love weed and our flat-brimmed brethren. Big Ag is also starting to nerd out about weed. Big agriculture, the people who grow the vast majority of the food that is consumed in the United States and around the world, as controlled by these huge multinational corporations, sort of the Monsanto effect, and how that approach to cultivation is going to come after cannabis, particularly as the legal prohibitions start to fall. It's easy to lose sight of the fact that right now cannabis is still considered a federally Schedule 1 drug, the most restrictive category. That, of course, is patently ridiculous and very, very harmful, but it has sort of kept cannabis versus all of our food crops out of the clutches of big ag, but they are already laying the groundwork to sort of do their thing, to have a takeover of the industry. And the way that they're going to attempt to do that is by taking out patents on the cannabis plant itself and different components of the cannabis plant. And I can already hear you saying, quite reasonably, Hey, man, you can't patent a plant that's like Mother Nature and shit. Well, hmm. That's unfortunately not true. And there are many, many plants that are patented, and that could be anything from corn and soybean that are bred to be resistant to Roundup, which is a pesticide, so that they can grow these massive fields of industrial corn and douse them with this chemical and still feed that corn to cows. It could also be things, and this is a more clear parallel to cannabis. It could be things like a Honeycrisp apple, which is a fucking tasty apple, but it is also a patented apple. You can't just grow and sell Honeycrisps yourself. You will be visited by patent attorneys. And now the sort of shadowy they that runs everything in this country, and we'll talk more about that on the next Green Pill episode. The big they are now past starting to, there are patents that have been taken out on cannabis, very wide ranging patents. And I actually wrote a 4-part investigative series of articles for Leafly about this, the coming age of corporate cannabis extending into the realm of taking out these patents. I investigated these companies that are sort of fronts for big ag. So you can't link them directly to the big multinational corporations, but they're staking out these patents. And it was very hard to find out information about who was doing this or why. And, this was probably the most investigative articles I've ever written personally. I've been a journalist for 20 years. Just because you're writing about something doesn't mean that you're literally investigating it and trying to find out new information and sort of uncover things that people don't want brought into the light. And so I'm going to put links in this Patreon, right where you found the video that you're watching right now, this one where I'm smoking a joint. I'll put links to each of these 4 articles, and aside from being a cautionary tale about how we can still stop this from happening and how we as a community need to start by recognizing this threat, the Monsantification of weed, and what we can do to stop it. But also it's just kind of a bit of a detective story as I try to track down who these people are, what these patents really mean, will they be enforceable, and what can we do, as I said, to stop them. So that's kind of nerding out in a different direction, in a somewhat frightening direction, but something that I think is really, really important. And on the flip side, and this was something that I definitely talked about in what we'll call the lost episode, because I was really, really feeling it yesterday, is, I think cannabis is also an incredibly effective medicine if you are going through any kind of depression. And this time of year, it can especially be very difficult for people. The days are short. The weather can be very cold or rainy, and it's easy to get isolated, and that affects our biochemistry in its own way, the short days. And of course, depression is something that can happen to anyone at any time, and some of us more than others. And I guess I just wanted to make it a point to put it out there that just how there should be no stigma around using cannabis at all, and yet there is. There really shouldn't be stigmas about having those feelings, feeling depressed, using cannabis to try to treat depression. is sort of facing this double stigma. But if it works for you, it is an incredibly safe medicine. It is a very good first line medicine. It is something that, you're going to want to combine with other strategies like diet, exercise, therapy, meditation, and perhaps other kinds of medicine that you may need to get a handle on that condition. But I think that weed is a really good place to start, and just know that you're not the only one out there uh, using cannabis in that way. So you are seen. The other version of this was better. What a terrible thing to say. Oh, you should have been here last night. It was great, but you're here tonight. No, I don't know. I guess just I guess to close the book on that, I'd say that, um, as weird as it feels to sit here in a room by myself, combined by surrounded by a bunch of cardboard boxes that I use as soundproofing, as a way to feel less isolated while talking literally to myself, talking back to me on a Zoom screen, and checking again and again every 5 seconds to make sure the recordings are still working, even though I have 2 different backups running right now. It actually does a lot for me. Um, it actually does a lot for me. And the reason is because, aside from the financial support that you give to this show, which pays the bills and a little more and allows me to put a lot of time and effort into the main Great Moments in Weed History episodes, which are very labor intensive. It also is just incredibly inspiring to me, and is really, it's been a difficult period for me professionally right now. Without getting into a ton of details, it's just, I can't complain. Any day that I am still able to cobble together some kind of a living, writing, making this show, doing other creative endeavors that I feel good about, I truly, truly do feel blessed for that. But also, it isn't the easiest road to hoe. And what I'm getting at is that, trying to make a lot of different things happen all of the time that are all dependent on somebody else giving you money because they think they're going to make more money back than they gave you originally is just dealing with capitalism over and over again as the barrier to, in essence, things that I want to express or things that I want to make. It's always going to be up and down. And, when it's down, it's down. But knowing that there are hundreds of people out there who feel strongly enough about this show to directly support it is a big lift for me, and something that helps me stay on this path and helps me feel energized to keep telling these stories. And you know and of course getting nice DMs from people who find a lot of value in the show. And I think of things in my own life that I've had that sort of connection to. I'll shout out the Mark Maron podcast, WTF, which is an incredible podcast. If you've never heard it, he is a comedian. He interviews people from all different parts of the entertainment world, but it's just something that I connect with very personally, that in a very difficult time in my life, I found that show as the first podcast I ever really listened to, and it got me through that difficult time, and now continues to be something that I really enjoy listening to. And although I have never met Mark Maron or have any connection to him, and don't expect that I ever will, particularly since he is on a journey of sobriety, and I'm a weed guy. Uh, to think that anybody looks to this show for not just entertainment or learning even about this plant and this culture, but for some form of relief, for some form of connection, that resonates with me really, really strongly. And so if anybody out there is having a rough one too, just know that you're not alone. Know that weed's not going to cure all your problems, but it might make you forget them for an hour or two, and it's good for the soul. But there's a great joke by the comedian Doug Benson who says, people say weed is a crutch, but crutches help people, man. And I think that's true. And so don't let anybody make you feel bad about feeling bad, and don't let anybody make you feel bad about smoking weed, and certainly don't let anybody make you feel bad about smoking weed when you're feeling bad. Now there's a t-shirt. So all of which is to say, before we get to our even nerdier presentation of this video from SC Labs about going, as they say, further and further into the terpernerverse, which is not quite a pun. It's a portmanteau, which is when you take two words and smush them together. But before we go uber weed nerd on this episode with our friend Alec, I wanted to share something with you that might help you reconnect with people at this time of year. A lot of I know for myself, I just don't feel like going out that much, and well, there's a motorcycle in the background, which I don't know if you can hear or not, or a leaf blower, or whatever the fuck people do all day in their yards that makes shitloads of noise. And I'm also, I guess, just trying to decide how raw and real I'm gonna go with this, and maybe I'll leave this up for a little while and then take it down. I don't know. Who invented the leaf blower? Crimes against humanity. The weed puns are for myself. And of course, it's only getting louder. But one thing that has... But anyway, I got to thinking to myself, what are some things that I can try to do to feel a little less isolated, even though I don't feel like maybe necessarily going out and about on the town and such. And I remembered a section from my book, How to Smoke Pot Properly, that some of you I know have, about how to throw a weed-themed dinner party. And I think it's such a wonderful idea. If you think of like going out to dinner with a big group of people, it's going to be a lot more expensive than throwing a dinner party. You have that uncomfortable bit of like, how do you split up the check? And the big one is most restaurants will not let you smoke weed or hang out at the restaurant for like 6 to 8 hours and play Scrabble after you eat. So I love restaurants, but what could be nicer than having a few friends over to get high, to share a meal, to share an evening, to have a nice intimate setting for that. And if you're hosting the dinner party, you don't have to go anywhere. And if you throw a fun one, perhaps the people you invited will in turn invite you over for a nice dinner at their house, and then you will get a free meal, and you you can not have to cook. So it's kind of a win-win. And don't think you have to be a great cook or even a good one to host a dinner party. There's a lot of things that you can do. You can invite people to bring their own food and make it more of a wait for it, who's ahead of me, where are my weed pun contemporaries at, more of a potluck type situation. There's a lot of things that are deceptively easy to cook that taste good, so don't let that be the intimidation point. I don't have a large home. I could only have a few people over for dinner at any given time, but you don't need formal dining ware and a big dining room table. You just need to invite some cool people over, make some decent food, have everybody bring some weed, and get into it. So settle in, everybody. I'm gonna settle in with one more puff. Oh, that's so good. Thanks for session with me, truly. And now we're going to settle in for an annotated, which means I'm going to stop and make asides, reading from How to Smoke Pot Properly, a section called How to Throw a Weed-Themed Dinner Party. Why waste another night going out and spending too much money on booze and coat checks when you can cook an amazing meal at home, get blazed with all your friends, and then settle in for an evening of marijuana-infused merriment? Couple notes. One, I definitely have stopped using the word marijuana professionally. Go with cannabis or weed. Shows you that the book is about 5 years old at this point. Marijuana doesn't offend me, but I do like to use cannabis in a more formal setting, weed in a less formal setting. I have dropped marijuana, but there it is. I'm not going to walk back from it. And more interestingly is this part about coat checks. You're going to save all this money on coat checks. I don't know what I was thinking, because I've probably checked a coat about 3 times in my life. Moving on. Now, start your weed-themed dinner party by carefully planning your guest list, remembering what the dude said. There's an art to hanging, and it starts with who you're hanging with. Now, this in this book refers to the dude being Jeff Dowd, who was the inspiration for the character the dude in the movie The Big Lebowski. So I actually got to interview Jeff Dowd, the inspiration, not the fictitious character, for High Times, which was quite a trip. He was a very interesting person. The character was pretty closely based on him. He had been a political activist. He was part of the Seattle 7. I don't know if he was a roadie for Metallica or not, but I do think Metallica probably is a bunch of assholes. Okay, some quick Big Lebowski references there, but what that movie, The Big Lebowski, and if you haven't seen it, you don't have to, but I recommend it, is really about is, in essence, for all the detective plot elements of it, it's a movie about hanging and the art of hanging and the elevation of hanging out to sort of what life is about in certain ways. If you really think back on the best times of your life, often it is hanging out, and that's what makes having people over for a meal is so fun, because you have created the vibe yourself. You've invited the mix of people that you think are interesting, and now this great hang can unfold. And as Jeff, the dude, Dowd said, there's an art to hanging, and it starts with who you're hanging with. That is something I have thought about literally hundreds of times since he said that to me in that interview. I think it's the second best piece of advice I ever got in my life. The first being from my grandfather, who told me, quote, when the bad stuff happens, don't be there. Unbelievably good advice, which has come to me almost like the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi at certain points in my life when I was like, I think it's time to leave, only to find out that that was indeed the time to leave. So make a tally of all your friends who really like to toke. I don't really use toke that much anymore either. And then decide how many of them you'd realistically want to entertain in your home at once. For a dinner party, it's best to keep it to 8 or fewer to ensure an intimate vibe. It also makes it a lot easier to cook. I mean, if you have one of those, giant Mr. Burns type dinner tables and you want to, invite 16 people over for dinner and you have a big kitchen that can handle all that, go for it. But especially the first time out trying to do this, less is more. Better a small success than a massive failure. Also, rather than, and I think this is key, rather than arranging an evening where everyone knows one another already, mix and match from the compartments of your life. And don't try to guess how different people, Susie from kickboxing class, Fred from high school, will get along in advance or worry who has, quote, nothing in common. Because you'd be surprised how quickly and irrevocably the herb can break the ice between otherwise disparate temperaments once things, quote, get rolling. Yes. Written weed puns with quotes around them. That was the vibe. This, I think, is really key, because if you just are kind of inviting the same group of people that always hang out together, your sort of central crew, it's easy for people to kind of, fall into second gear, or what's the faster gear? A lower gear, a slower gear. I'm not a car guy. It's easy for people to kind of get too chill, too relaxed, too comfortable, and you get a lot of conversations like, "Sup, bro? How you been?" "Good, man. How you been?" "Doing good, doing good." "Oh, right on, right on." Whereas if there's a little bit of what the French, I believe, call frisson, because people are meeting for the first time. They're, curious about each other. They're trying to, represent themselves as in an interesting way. It's going to just make for a much more happening. And also, it's a fun experiment to see how, if you do have a sort of, different circles that you run in, as long as everybody knows they're getting invited to a weed party with lots of weed at it, it's interesting to see how people interact. And you can, of course, also invite people who don't partake of weed at all. Just, let them know what they're getting into, and then make sure that nobody pressures them to partake in cannabis, or of course tricks them into partaking in cannabis via an edible or something like that. Okay, more practical advice. At the appointed hour, greet each new arrival with a relaxed smile, plenty of comfortable seating, upbeat instrumental music at a moderate volume. Just put on whatever fucking music you want. I don't. Who wrote this? Oh, me. But I don't know. I guess I'm trying to be like Emily Post or something, who actually a couple of years after this, her great granddaughter or whatever the fuck, Emily Post the third or some shit, wrote a weed etiquette book, and it's like, you know what? Fuck you. Can I have it? And the New York Times reviewed it, because of course they did. Who better to tell you about weed than Emily Post's great granddaughter or whatever the fuck. Picking this up. So when people show up, and you want to have two well-appointed tables right when people arrive. One has got some ready-to-eat light snacks on it, and this is going to take the pressure off your dinner. As long as people have some snacks. If dinner is a little late, that's no problem, especially if people are also having a drink. You don't want people having three drinks on an empty stomach and then stumbling up to the dinner table to do a dab and pass out in the mashed potatoes. And on the other table, invite a 12-year-old boy whose voice is changing. I'm only I'm only willing to be this big of an idiot because I am going to go back and snip some of this out, I think. So on this other table, you would have some weed out, some concentrates if you're got an endabulator and you know how to use it. And also, have everything labeled. Let people know what the strain is, anything you know about it. Have some, nice rolling papers and a grinder out. So you want to encourage people to bring their own weed to the party so that you have a lot of different varieties to sample, and it's a good conversation starter, but you also want to have some weed laid out right when people get there so they can feel comfortable and roll one up. Take time to point out, so that people walk in and give them a little, it's just as you would say, hey, I got some hors d'oeuvres. Those are Swedish meatballs, even though it's quite obvious when you're just looking at a Swedish meatball. I mean, like, the fuck else is it going to be? Do the same for your weed. Let people know, okay, we've got some dabs if you want to endabulate them. I got a couple of strains, and Leslie's gonna come later, and I think she's bringing some super skunk or whatever the fuck. And encourage everybody else to, not just bring some weed, but to put it out on the table, put it in a little jar. If you get invited to a dinner party, sort of the standard thing to bring is a bottle of wine. Kind of can't go wrong with a bottle of wine, but you don't keep it in your pocket the whole dinner party and pour a little glass. Hey, you want a glass of wine? Okay, come here. You put it out on the table, and if people want some, they take some. So treat weed the same way, and then let all the heads decide for themselves how and when to dig into this cornucopia of cannabis, using this array of rolling papers and filters and grinders and pipes and endabulators that you've laid out. So don't try to make it a sesh where everybody's got to smoke the same thing at the same time. Make it a party where people are just doing their own thing, interacting, getting lit. And before I forget, if anybody is inspired by this to throw a weedy dinner party, I would love to know about it. I'd love to hear anything you have to share, and I'd be happy to give you any advice or encouragement. Oof. I'm gonna take a weed break. I will say officially, I'm just feeling way better now than when I started this, no matter. It's a journey, not the destination. As for the dinner part of this dinner party, how you approach preparing the main course should depend on your general level of culinary competence and your guests' expectations. In any case, stick with a menu of dishes you've made successfully before, since you'll be scaling them up significantly to feed all of your super stoned friends while operating in a thick haze of weed smoke. And here's a big tip. There's plenty of things that you can make in advance and just warm up for the party that are going to be delicious and homemade and everything you're going for. But you don't really want to spend the whole party in the back, trying to caramelize onions and have 50 different things going on in the kitchen. One, you're not going to be there to host your party, which is really important. And two, you're not going to be there to enjoy your party. And three, it's very easy for things to go off the rails, which is also, as careful longtime listeners know, our pretend cocaine podcast, Off the Rails. Just a little shout out for that. It's very easy for things to go off the rails if you're trying, and particularly if you're cooking over your head. If you're trying to make something you've never made before, that's maybe more difficult. Don't get into that. That's not what's going. If you are a real foodie, you already know how to do all this and just like knock yourself out. But for the average person, I'm not. I don't want to suggest a specific dish, but just something like a lasagna, you can make and warm up and serve, and it's gonna taste great. Those are the kind of vibes that you want to go for. Then there's just sort of specific things about like what tastes good when you're really stoned. Sometimes things with sauces or gravies, shit like that. But try to make sure that you use, I don't know, serve whatever the fuck you want. And then having stuff like Jenga or Pictionary or charades or all these sort of like classic what they call parlor games, because you can just play them in a room with people and you don't need a lot of setup and you don't really need to learn how to play them. You can just pick up on it and have fun. That's really fun too. And it's easy for a weed party, especially that's not like a rager, to kind of like hit a plateau and get so chill that it's like too chill. So some stuff like that can be really fun. Enjoy the food, enjoy good smoke. I mean, the most important thing is to bring some people together, which is one of the best things about weed. I certainly have been a loner stoner many times in my life, and that can be wonderful. But like food, see that rhetorical turn where I'm like kind of bringing it into the home stretch. Like food, cannabis is one of the real blessings of life and real blessings and bounties of the earth. That everybody eats food, not everybody consumes cannabis, but I think that if we did get rid of all the stigmas and all the bullshit, probably almost everyone would, because it's quite wonderful. And it's certainly not like alcohol, where some percentage of people really struggle with it and some percentage of people understand that it's not for them. All of which is to say, weed brings people together, but not all by itself. A weed themed dinner party is an excellent excuse to gather folks from all the compartments of your life, share an evening with them, and you don't even have to leave your own home. And like I said, you might get some good, fun invitations down the road. Okay, so that I think is with one more sesh. That's going to bring the sesh portion of this secret sesh to a close. It got kind of all over the place. Thanks if you listened to this far. I know you must have appreciated it on some level, or you were waiting to see how far off the rails it would get. But either way, thanks for the hang. Thanks for the support. Thanks for being a part of this community. Thanks for valuing the work that we do on Great Moments in Weed History and helping us. Just by throwing in on it, it ensures that not just that the show is there for all of us, but that, and that's the one other thing that I could say. Most of the people who listen to the show, of course, are not going to, for whatever reason, directly financially support it. And most of those people are never going to send an email or a DM or whatever. But every day I can tell you that this show reaches every day thousands and thousands of people, some of whom are, of course, finding it for the first time and learning about this plant right along with us. And so, you are not just creating this community for all of us, but for all of those other people to learn and have an appreciation for the history of cannabis. And of course, as long as I am alive and financially of the wherewithal to do it, I will keep that archive free to everybody. We're coming up on almost 100 shows now, so I'm really proud of that body of work. I appreciate you hanging with me and having a sesh. And wait, don't hit stop or pause. You can hit pause. Stay tuned, because after after I stop talking, if I ever stop talking, that's the other problem, is it's right back to real life. See if we can stave off whatever's waiting on the other side of that. I am going to immediately share with you this presentation from Alec Dixon, our guest last weed on Great Moments in Weed History, going into the Terpenerverse, this presentation that he and his colleagues at SC Labs made for the judges at the Emerald Cup, which I am now going to share with you. And speaking confidently as a guy who has 2 separate backups running on this recording, I will say it was a real pleasure both times sharing the secret sesh, having a secret sesh with you, and I'm very happy to be able to share this one with you. A little wait. I'll give you a secret. It's actually 4:20 right now where I live. So for the first time, we're sharing a secret sesh 420 together. Thanks for hanging. I will see you all next Weedness Day. I have a really cool episode planned. I haven't recorded the interview yet, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. It's not some big celebrity, but it is a subject that I've really wanted to talk about on the show, and found the perfect guest to do so. So until then, thanks everybody, and see ya next weed.
Picture this. You walk into a dispensary looking for that perfect strain of cannabis that's not going to make you sleepy, maybe give you that perfect daytime buzz. What do you see? You see a bunch of jars on the shelf with different strain names, some of which you may recognize, most of which you probably don't. Maybe they're labeled indica, sativa, or hybrid. And if you're lucky, you might have some test results from a laboratory like ours to look at. And if you're really lucky, those test results might have concentrations for something called terpenes listed as well. And so after this presentation, hopefully you'll be able to use just those test results to go in and find that perfect strain of cannabis that you're looking for. Hi, I'm Josh Werzer.
And I'm Alec Dixon. Today we're going to take you on an olfactory odyssey, or better yet, a scent safari into cannabis and terpenes to better understand the range of this great plant and what it has to offer.
So to really understand what cannabis is going to work best for you and what you're going to prefer, you need to know what the active ingredients in cannabis are. Now, you're probably aware of the cannabinoids, and the most well-known cannabinoid, THC. Delta-9 THC is the main psychoactive ingredient in the vast majority of cannabis you're going to consume. Beyond that, you may be aware of a cannabinoid called CBD. CBD is known as one of the more medicinal of the cannabinoids, and it doesn't get you high or doesn't have that same psychoactive effect that THC does. But beyond that, there's dozens of cannabinoids. And beyond the cannabinoids, cannabis has the potential to produce dozens and dozens of compounds called terpenes. And terpenes are the aromatic compounds that give cannabis its flavor, its unique aromas, and beyond that, potentiates the effects of the cannabinoids to give you the variance from one high to the next. And as all of us cannabis consumers know, cannabis can have a wide variety of effects, more so than maybe some of the other psychoactive drugs that you're used to, like alcohol, for instance. And so these cannabinoids interplaying with the terpenes are what are responsible for that. Beyond that, cannabis is consumed through inhalation the vast majority of the time. And since it's consumed through inhalation, these terpenes and cannabinoids are even more powerful in producing different effects in the body. So, Alec, you want to talk about some of the different terpenes and what their effects may be on the body?
To really understand cannabis on this level of understanding the terpenes that this plant produces, really we need to familiarize and know about 6 primary terpenes. And by knowing those primary terpenes, we really have the foundation for understanding how this great plant sorts and offers itself. So first off, we have myrcene. Myrcene is one of the most common terpenes found in cannabis. Myrcene adds a bit of a fruity smell and is the primary terpene, one of the primary terpenes found in the smell of hops and also in mango. So myrcene, whenever it's together with THC, it helps to increase this or bring about this relaxation, kind of sedating kind of quality that historically we've thought of as indica, but really it has to do with this terpene myrcene together with THC that brings about that couch lock relaxation type effect. So next we have beta-caryophyllene. Beta-caryophyllene is the primary terpene found behind the smell of clove and black pepper. Beta-caryophyllene is also the only terpene that's known to bind to an endocannabinoid receptor. It binds to CB2, which is located throughout our peripheral nervous system, our immune cells, and also throughout our gastrointestinal tract. So beta-caryophyllene kind of adds a bit of a earthy, spicy kind of note to the smell of cannabis. And similar to myrcene, it's kind of the other terpene that's really on the, comforting kind of quote-unquote indica side of the effect spectrum. So really when we're thinking about, these sedative, relaxing, kind of comforting type qualities, we're talking about myrcene and caryophyllene. So next, moving on to limonene. Limonene is the essence of citrus and is found in citrus rinds, other types of citrus. But when together with THC, it helps to bring about this real uplifting antidepressant type effect. And obviously it adds this bit of a citrusy kind of fruity notes to the smell of cannabis. So next we have terpenylene. Terpenylene is one of the lesser pronounced or present terpenes found in cannabis. And terpenylene is found in the smell of lilac and also the smell of patchouli. Terpenylene is kind of the terpene really behind and responsible for what has largely been described as the sativa effect historically. So terpenylene, when together with THC, really helps to bring about a more energizing type effect, artistically inspiring, creative, kind of cerebral in that way. So next we have alpha-pinene, which is the smell largely responsible for pine tree and pine needles. Pinene, when together with THC, helps bring about a focusing type effect, and actually whenever it's together and present with THC, it helps to decrease the negative memory impairment effects that THC has in short term. So it's also kind of on that more stimulating side of the effect spectrum. And lastly, we have ocimene, which is also known as ocimene, and is this the terpene behind the smell of lavender, and is a low-key floral terpene, but it adds a bit of a tropical, fruity type smell whenever together with THC.
In order to really be able to harness the power of terpenes and make decisions based on their content in cannabis, the first thing you're going to need to know is how to read a certificate of analysis, or a COA. all laboratories, ours are included, are going to produce one of these COAs for every batch of cannabis we test. And most cannabis batches are going to have results for the cannabinoid content of that particular batch, as well as maybe some safety or quality control testing. And ideally, you're going to also see percentages and concentrations of the terpenes found in that cannabis. Beyond that, at SC Labs, we've licensed a really unique and exciting data visualization tool called PhytoFacts. And what PhytoFacts does is, beyond just reporting the cannabinoids and terpene percentages, it tries to give the user some sort of visualization and some sort of actionable information that really helps them make more informed and better decisions when it comes to their cannabis. And the way we do this is by taking the terpene and cannabinoid percentages, referencing them against all the peer-reviewed literature studies on terpenes and cannabinoids, and predicting potential outcomes from consuming that strain of cannabis based on the terpene and cannabinoid concentrations. And at this point, it really makes sense to define what's called a chemotype. Now, as we've been saying to this point, cannabis is usually listed by its strain name or varietal name. And these are just names given to cannabis by breeders that they pick from either something that they've referenced in the past, some other strain that they like, what maybe the strains that went into breeding that cannabis strain, or maybe it's just something that comes to mind when they consume it. But really, for you, unless you're familiar with that strain, it doesn't really tell you anything about what it really is going to do for you. What a chemotype does, or by referring to cannabis by its chemotype, what you're doing is you're referencing the chemical constituents of that cannabis. And so a chemotype is going to be based on what are the cannabinoid percentages, what are the terpene percentages. And that's, as scientists, how we prefer to refer to different varieties of cannabis, by their chemotype. And once you start referring to cannabis by your chemotypes, well, then you start to wonder, well, are there more strain names than there need to be? Can we take all of these, hundreds and thousands of strain names and sort of boil them down into basic groups of cannabis that are all similar to each other? And a really good analogy to this is wine. In wine, you have red wine, white wine, and within those two categories, you're going to have very many different varieties of wine, but not nearly as many as we find in cannabis. You're going to have Cabernets, you're going to have Pinots, but you're not going to have hundreds of different kinds of wine, and it helps the consumer to really pick wine. If I like a Cabernet, I might have 100 different choices of Cabernet, but I know that they're all going to be similar. And so at SC Labs, with our hundreds of thousands of terpene test results, what we're able to do is using statistical analysis and even some artificial intelligence, be able to sort of group our cannabis samples into buckets or into broad categories that all sort of fit together with each other. And so, Alec, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the different categories we found through our work, and maybe kind of bring to light what strains we're familiar with that fall within those categories.
So, just as Josh was mentioning, you can really start to understand how cannabis sorts by terpene content, similar to the wine analogy. You have red wines, white wines, and then individual grapes within. And so, when we started looking at our historic data set, over 160,000 unique terpene tests, we really started to understand that, with 98% predictability, all terpene tests we've ever sorted, turn out to sort into one of what we see as about 4 primary smell groups. And each primary group has, say, 2 to 3 subgroups. But overall, there's about 12 to 15 archetype profiles that really define modern cannabis. And so to understand cannabis in this way and to pay full tribute to the diversity of what it has to offer, it's on us to kind of understand how the data sorts and how cannabis expresses. So what are the groups? So myrcene represents the largest group of cannabis of what we see. About 43% of all testing we've ever ran are profiles that are primary in myrcene, or so they're dominant in myrcene. Myrcene, these types of strains are kind of the, fruity-ish type strains, a lot of the classic quote-unquote indica smells. So, tangy, forbidden fruit, Cali O, Agent Orange, Cherry AK, Blueberry, Blue Dream, even various strains like all the purples, Purple Urkel, GDP, Grape Ape, When there's really high myrcene with a little bit of osamine, you know, that's all of a sudden all the tropical fruits. So mango, papaya, green crack, in the pines, pineapple. And so myrcene overall represents about the largest amount of data and has the most amount of subgroupings contained within. So the next cluster that we see is caryophyllene and limonene. Caryophyllene and limonene tend to track together. So most strains we see kind of will, you know, have both limonene and caryophyllene in them if they're in this class. You know, some of them will be slightly higher in caryophyllene relative to limonene, while others will be slightly higher in limonene relative to caryophyllene. But the archetype profiles that we see within this class are balanced in caryophyllene and limonene, and that includes all types of the strains. The more popular strains of the day like gelato, Sunday driver, wedding cake, wedding crasher, do-si-do. A lot of these types of more popular kind of dessert type strains. So next we move on to terpinolene. Terpinolene represents about 10% of our overall data set. Terpinolene is the kind of the classic sativa type terpene. Various strains like Trainwreck, Jack Herer, Ghost Train Haze, a lot of the historic haze strains like Super Lemon Haze, Durban Poison, Dutch Treat, Bull Rider. We see kind of all kind of within this cluster. Next we have alpha pinene. Alpha pinene strains represent about 6% of the data. It's one of the smaller clusters. Usually whenever we see alpha pinene present, it's masked by the myrcene that's in that strain. But what about 6.5% of the data we'll see no myrcene, but it'll be primary in pinene. And so various strains in this cluster include, kind of rosé, Old Amsterdam, Laffy Taffy, Sour Caramello, and the like. So osamine is the last cluster. We see about 1% of the data kind of be osamine dominant profiles. Osamine typically will track with either myrcene or terpinolene, but be a secondary or tertiary terpene relative to the myrcene or terpinolene. But in 1% of the data, we see osamine as the primary terpene and no myrcene or terpinolene. And so, various strains within here are Tropical Sleigh Ride and Hawaiian Sunrise, Happy Pineapple, et cetera, et cetera.
So how do all these trends in the different groupings that we're talking about apply to the Emerald Cup? Well, we've been testing for the Emerald Cup for over 10 years now. And one of the exciting things that's happened with the Cup is it really allows us to get a peek into sort of what's going on with marrying the qualitative aspects of cannabis with the quantitative aspects that we're measuring. And the Cup has always been one of the most respected cups because of how rigorous the judging process is. You have several judges who are experts in cannabis who are blind testing these strains and giving their scores without any insight into the quantitative analysis that we've done at the lab. And what we've found is these judges who are blind testing these samples really make no difference or don't distinguish quality based on THC content, which is kind of what the average consumer is doing, because generally that's the only kind of data point that they have when they walk into a dispensary is like maximum THC. And what you see here is that the top 20 cannabis samples in the Emerald Cup, or the top 20 winners of the Cup, have basically the exact same THC concentration as all the other samples that were entered. So the winners don't really have any higher THC results. But what we do see, in where there is a huge difference between the winners and all the rest of the also-rans, is in the total terpene content. And you see here that there's a much, much larger overall terpene concentration in the top 20 samples than there is in all the other samples. And this goes to show you that the judges are basing their opinion on a cannabis strain more on the flavor and maybe the subtle effects from one to the other than they are in just the total overall THC results. And so, Alec, why don't you give some other insights into some of the trends we've seen over the years with our analysis of the Emerald Cup?
One of the most fascinating trends we came to see in the Emerald Cup this year is how present or prevalent, caryophyllene and limonene were in the cup. So about 54% of the overall entries were this caryophyllene and limonene co-balanced profile. Again, that's the desserts, gelato, sherbet, Sunday driver, wedding cake, wedding crasher. But overall, you can see how popular these entries were in the Emerald Cup this year. Another really interesting trend that we see in the Emerald Cup data this year is the presence of osmine as a terpene. So many years ago, within the pines, this terpene was really introduced in the Emerald Cup, and then in 2017, two profiles that were osmine dominant, the Tropical Sleigh Ride and the Hawaiian Sunrise, won the most unique terpene awards in the Emerald Cup. So this year, in 2020, we saw about 15 entries in the Emerald Cup this year that were osmine, that shared this osmine dominant profile, and so in so many ways, it really shows how much the Emerald Cup, through highlighting and paying tribute to kind of these ranges of profiles, can really help influence the types of strains that are grown or selected or bred for. So, in conclusion, I hope that you've enjoyed taking this olfactory odyssey and scent safari with us today into the universe of terpenes and understanding the range of what cannabis has to express and offer. By understanding and paying tribute to the spectrum of terpenes found in cannabis, not only do we have a roadmap for understanding better what types of strains might best suit our needs or conditions, but also to pay tribute to understanding how terpene content really are the primary metrics that help to define quality much beyond THC solely. So thank you for your time. Giving thanks to the Emerald Cup and the team behind this great event, and how much it took to put this on. Giving thanks to you, paying attention today to help in this way of each one teach one in the spreading of information.
I just want to second what Alex says. It's really been an honor to test for the cup all these years, and I hope that you've learned something and that going forward, you'll be a more informed consumer of cannabis. Thank you and have a great day.